Last year in The Atlantic, Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote this: "The hammer of criminal justice is the preferred tool of a society that has run out of ideas." People go to jail for not having a driver's license. People go to jail for not having a home. People go to jail for having a mental illness that presents as threatening to us. People go to jail for possessing substances they're addicted to. People also go to jail, of course, for being violent, for taking other people's property, for damaging property that's not theirs. In communities like ours, far too often our response to that kind of antisocial behavior is to put those people in a cage. And that doesn't work. There's another real big problem with the way we do things, is it doesn't necessarily apply if you have money. People with money buy car insurance and get a driver's license. People with money rent an apartment and live there. People with money have health insurance that helps them get their mental health care that they need. People with money go into rehab if they're addicted. And people with money can even buy their way out of jail if they're facing a charge of committing a violent offense under the rules of our money bail system. Far too often, if you come into contact with the criminal justice system and you don't have money, you end up in a cage. If you come into contact with the criminal justice system and you do have money, you don't. So we're definitely using a hammer to treat problems that don't respond to that. And I think that we haven't run out of ideas, however. I have two for you today, and there are lots and lots more great ideas of how to treat people in the criminal justice system without using a hammer. So I'm going to tell you about two of those, but first, I want to tell you about my friend Ray. Ray grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. He graduated Carver High School. All right. He joined the Navy. He learned to weld in the Navy, and he served aboard the USS Forrestal. That's this aircraft carrier right there. And Ray has told me stories of seeing things around the world in the Mediterranean and the South Pacific, the Suez Canal. I can only imagine a young kid leaving Memphis for the first time and seeing the things that he saw from the deck of that aircraft carrier. But when I met Ray, several years later, it was the year 2000, we met outside this courtroom at 201 Poplar at our Criminal Justice Center here in Memphis, Tennessee. I was a 25-year-old public defender, fresh out of law school, and Ray was one of my clients. By the time I met Ray, he was a 40-something homeless man addicted to crack cocaine. He was facing his second offense DUI, which carries with it a 45-day mandatory sentence. But Ray had scraped together enough money to bail out of jail, and so he would meet me outside the courtroom from wherever he had slept the night before. At the same time, I had 20, sometimes 30 other clients, most of whom were in jail, and many of whom were struggling with the same problems that Ray was struggling with: mental health issues, addiction, homelessness. And my job as a 25-year-old public defender right out of law school was to help those people. And I didn't have a lot that I could do for them. And so Ray's case was particularly challenging because when we would sit down and talk about what to do about his case, I had 20 people sitting in cages, wanting out of cages, who needed my time. And we struggled to figure out what to do with Ray. And we struggled with all those people. And the problem with folks like Ray was that for 10 years he'd been cycling in and out of this system, because when we bring people into this system like Ray and like all of my many, many other clients over the years, and we don't have anything other than a cage to give them, when we let them out, because we almost always let them back out, they come back. And there's a revolving door in our criminal justice system because of that. And when you do that long enough, we've been doing it as a country for 30 or 40 years, your obligatory TEDx graph slide looks like that. The year I was born is right in the middle, just by coincidence. 1974, we had about 218,000 people in our jails and prisons in this country, 218,000. Today, that number is well above 2 million. I'm no math major, but that's 10 times the population in my lifetime. And Ray was one of those guys, and so many of my clients have been one of those people. And here's the thing, though. It doesn't apply to people like this, who about the same time Ray got into trouble, he got into trouble. That's Robert Downey Jr., who was arrested on August 25th, 1999, for speeding down Sunset Boulevard with some heroin, some cocaine, and just for good measure, a loaded .357 Magnum in the trunk of his car. Robert Downey Jr. didn't get a 25-year-old public defender to help him figure this out, as you can imagine. Robert Downey Jr. came to court with a team of attorneys, and they weren't there to proclaim his innocence and convince the judge that it wasn't really Robert Downey Jr. that did these things. They came with a plan on how to keep Robert Downey Jr. from doing it again, a plan to address his mental health issues, a plan to address his addiction and substance abuse issues. And they presented that to the judge, and the judge agreed. And the judge gave Robert Downey Jr. probation. And Robert Downey Jr. left the courthouse. He came back because addiction and mental health are very complicated issues that so many of us struggle with. And when you add in the hammer of criminal justice, it becomes nearly impossible to escape. In fact, he got not just 2, 3, 4, but 5 chances before the judge finally sentenced him to prison. But he had resources, and my clients, Ray, and so many of my other clients, they don't have those. But here's the good news. We have ideas. This is a TEDx talk. So here's my first idea. This is an idea from right here in Shelby County, in Memphis, Tennessee. We have something called the Jericho Project, and it's not radical. It's the same exact thing that Robert Downey Jr.'s lawyers did for him. The Jericho Project builds a plan for people in the jail at 201 Poplar in Shelby County for when they get out. And it's only a 4-month-long plan. It's not very long. And it uses largely resources that already exist in our community. But before you leave the back door of that jail as a Jericho client, you know where you're going to get your medicine. You know when your next appointment is. You know where you're going to live if you need that. And you have someone to help you do all of that for only 4 months. At a very low cost, you have a plan. The people that the Jericho Project serves have a really high recidivism rate. They come back into the system very, very often, 80% of the time, because they suffer from mental health issues and substance abuse issues. With the Jericho Project, we've cut that rate in half to 40%, which is still a lot, but I think that testifies to the complicated nature of these types of people. But it works, and it works the same way that people with resources use the criminal justice system now and have forever. And so it's made a big impact on the back door of the jail in this community. We've got a problem at the front door of the jail as well, because we have a system, unlike any other place in the world except for the Philippines. There are only 2 countries in the world that use money bail. And money bail is essentially this. If you can pay a bail before you answer to the charges against you, you can get out of jail. Pre-trial detention serves 2 purposes. It serves the purpose of making sure you get back to court when you're supposed to be there, and it protects the community if you're a high risk to reoffend. And sometime centuries ago in England, we decided that money was the way to make this decision. And so we attach a dollar amount to someone who we arrest and charge with a crime. And that dollar amount is supposed to take care of that risk. Well, it doesn't work like that, as you can imagine, because you can be violent, you can have repeat, you can have a very bad record, but if you have money, you pay your way out. Conversely, you're poor, it's your first or second offense, it's a low-level drug offense, and you can't scrape together $100, you wait in a cage. So the system, again, creates one path for people with money, one path for people without. So the idea is this, and it's not original to Just City and to Memphis, Tennessee, but it's a community bail fund. We've started one here in Memphis. We've started one in Nashville. And what we're doing is poking a hole in this idea that money should have anything to do with this. We collect money, take donations from the community. We use that to bail people out. We remove the incentive that they have. It's not their money. If they don't come back, we don't go after them. But guess what? They come back. And in Nashville, for more than 110 times now, we've bailed people out, and 97% of the time they come back. We've had no serious incidents of reoffense. And that mirrors bail funds all across the country. They're sprouting up everywhere. We had a couple in the South for the first time. They've been in New York, they're in California, and Boston, and Chicago, and they're all showing the same thing, that people come back. That using money to decide who gets let out and who doesn't is a terrible, terrible way to do it. So, what can a TEDx audience do, and why do I have a Cadillac slide up here? Here's what you need to know. You need to know about Ray, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about him in just a second. But Jericho projects and bail funds are easy. The answer to this hammer of criminal justice is not more Jericho projects and more bail funds. The answer is a fundamental shift in how we see the people like Ray and the dozens and hundreds and thousands of men and women that I've represented over the years. Seeing them, as my co-speaker earlier today, Greg Thompson, said, with the irrevocable glory, irreducible glory that they represent, the potential that they represent, and not the despicable things that they've done. Because we all have that irreducible glory, and we've all done those despicable things, but we don't have a system that recognizes that 19-year-old sailor seeing the world for the first time on top of an aircraft carrier that he helped hold together with his welds. What kind of potential would we see in a young man like that? But what we saw was a 45-year-old drug addict, homeless, out in front of a courtroom. And that's what we gave him. Well, luckily for us, people like Ray are incredibly resilient. Ray did his 45 days because he had me for a lawyer. But 28 of those days he got to spend in inpatient drug treatment. And something in Ray's experience, something in Ray's brain made him decide someday during that 28 days he was done. And he wanted to live a life of sobriety. And so every day for 18 years, he's woken up and he's decided, I'm not going to use drugs and alcohol today. He went to work. As soon as he got out, he still works for that same employer for 18 years. He's been Employee of the Year. He has 17 people that he supervises. He bought a Cadillac. He bought 2 Cadillacs, actually. He's had a couple. And he paid off every debt that he ever owed. But he's the exception. He's the exception because we do have a hammer, and we use it far too often. And opportunity and seeing the potential in people is not something that's in the conversation in our criminal justice system. It absolutely has to be. And we depend on people like you to force that, to force our leaders to make decisions that create opportunities like this for people like Ray so that we can have more and more and more stories like that. Because otherwise, this hammer of criminal justice is going to continue to destroy our communities. Thanks.